venture capitalists last week, and the week before we heard from team owner Ivan Yeo, Evos Esports. So today, we have our guest today, from a coaching perspective. We have Jensen Goh, a well-established esports coach himself in the League of Legends, the game which is League of Legends. He traveled and coached in 8 different countries, all across the world, imagine, and today we have him here to talk about his incredible journey in esports, and as well as a quick glimpse into some of the juicy stuff in his new book, which I believe is the first of its type written by a Singaporean on esports. So, hi Jensen, we have Jensen online. Jensen, how are you?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to be here and joining you for this.
So we're going to go straight to the point. You started very early in esports during your university days, I believe, and that was around 2015 or 2014. Okay, tell us, and there was a team that back then, that were you involved in. Tell us a bit about more of your team, Vestigal.
So the team that I was involved in was Team Vestigio. I was running it together with this other guy called Nelson. He's also coaching at the moment in China. And let's just set the scene back to what things were like in 2015, right? Back then, people were looking at the international. That was the big headlines that was grabbing the news. I think when it was announced that the price was 18 million, Blizzard was announcing Blizzard Dota, which turned out to be Heroes of the Storm in 2015 as well. And at the point of time, we were seeing very serious evaluations. We were seeing very serious attempts at trying to monetize esports in a much more aggressive way. Before that, it was always about building teams in a team model. How do I get the highest performing team to do as well as we could at a particular tournament? And then people were starting to realize that this could be the future of sports as a whole. And I think that that was when ideas were started to be conceptualized. And that was what the scene was back then. But it was all in the ideation phase. So nobody had a very solid idea as to what the strategy should be like. Nobody had a very solid idea of what the revenue streams are going to be like. Even the sponsors that were coming in, they're coming in on a very trial basis. They're coming in on a let's test the waters, let's see how much of a ROI that we get, all these type of things. And it was an interesting learning experience. We call the team Vestigio. I don't really know why they chose to name it that way, but they like the letters VTL because it formed in a very interesting way that was representative of the Marina Barrage. If you looked at it at a certain angle, right? If you angle it, you can see the Marina Bay towers, and then you can see the building sticking out at the very sides, the VTL. So it was this idea that it was supposed to be the Singaporean-led organization. We had the streaming contract that we had to fulfill together with Zubu, and that's where we started to get the streamers. We brought in 2 teams, so 3 teams actually, two from the League of Legends side and one from the Heroes of the Storm side, and we're trying to run this as an organization of sorts, curating content and then trying to grow the brand and value of the streamers under us.
Hey, you mentioned that back then, even some of the brands are just doing trial. They are just testing out the sponsoring, testing out the waters in esports. So do you think that's the situation even now in Singapore? Let's not talk about the other countries yet, but in Singapore, do you think that's also the situation that we are at?
Yeah, definitely so. And I think that back then it was only the few products that were really trying to find the next big avenue. So we were talking about Red Bull, and then they'll tell us limitations that were very real, right? Because if you talk about doing things entirely on a streaming platform, everything on a purely online platform, you have the challenge of it's hard to sell physical things, right? If you have an expo, if you have a roadshow, you have an offline event, you can do booths and people can sell physical products there. But you can't sell a pair of Levi's jeans through a stream. You can't sell a can of Red Bull through the stream. And that's where the value of the brands were. And that was what they told us and all of that. And I think that even today, what we're seeing is the transformation of the digital and media economy as a whole. And I think that the way that people continue to look and monitor how people consume entertainment, how people's attention continues to be divided throughout the day, people will start to try to come up with more strategies as to how can we get the best brand exposure through esports itself. And I think that this was very useful for me as well when I was going to university, and I was learning all these additional things about the marketing funnel as to where esports should be coming in terms of the various layers, in terms of what mechanism are you trying to fulfill, right? I mean, pardon me for speaking in all these abstract terms because it's such a broad and it's such a very interesting topic, and at the moment so many people are trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So, and we're going to talk about a little bit of the Singapore scene maybe later in the part of the show. But one name strike me. You were saying you have a partner back then called named Nelson, and is he still coaching in China?
Yes, he's currently working for Leaning Gaming. So Leaning, for those of you who are not so familiar, it is kind of like the Nike of China. It's this very famous gymnast, and then
Yep.
they started their own sports apparel brand and stuff like that, and then they have ventured into esports as well. He's currently, I think I want to say he's the head coach of the team, but the titling system is kind of like different over there. But he's in a rather executive position for the esports, for the League of Legends division over there.
Oh, it's amazing, to always hear that there is another fellow Singaporean who has actually worked in China, or who's actually currently still working in China in esports. That's always a very good news to hear. For some of the listener out there, it's actually the market is actually quite big. If you include China. And moving on, I saw that, on one of the news, or back when I saw Vestigal was actually took over by Team Flash. What actually happened there? You want to talk a bit about it?
So when we were running Vestigial, it was most of the revenue came in through the streaming contract that we had with Azubu, and that was kind of a limited term. And then when we were running towards the end of the contract, we were running into some payment issues from Azubu's side as well. And to be honest, the amount that we were making at that point of time, we made some few trips to Vietnam. We went to Hanoi, I went to Ho Chi Minh myself to figure out what was the esports scene over there, because we felt that this was a very big untapped market at the point of time, and this was before EBOS went into Vietnam. This is before Flash went into Vietnam as a whole. And we went in there, and then we tried to apply some of the concepts that we learned. We tried to bring some of the streamers there over, and then there were all sorts of challenges, right? From servers not being accommodating to people streaming from Vietnam on the Azubu platform, to I think it was not so much streaming, but rather watching on the platform was difficult for them. So we were not able to get good traction there, and we felt that the growth that we were seeing in the Singaporean scene itself, this was a very big lesson for me as well in the esports world. The growth when we were just thinking about doing things in terms of Singapore as an English language content team, or doing things just in two countries, it was too small of a thing. It was too small thinking, and then that's where we decided that okay, we got these offers to go coach in Taiwan. So we both got offers at the same time to pursue coaching gigs in Taiwan, and we saw how much it was paying, and we said, okay, this is a chance for us to prove ourselves and get our names out there in the coaching scene, and we both jumped on the opportunity. So that left a void of sorts, and with things how they were going in Vestigial, we decided not to continue the project, and the team was handed over to Flash after that. So there was still a League of Legends team under the Vestigial flag. There were still plans for them moving forward. Um, but with us making the decision to go to Taiwan, we couldn't continue with that. So we just passed the team over to Flash. There was no official transfer of the assets or whatsoever of Vestigial over to Flash. It's just the League of Legends team was the one that went over to Flash.
I see. So just a little bit more detail in there. So you spoke about Vietnam, and then we know that Team Flash is actually has quite a strong League of Legends team in Vietnam as well. So can I say that actually you were part of that pioneer of that team that went over to Team Flash?
Oh no! That definitely not. That roster was the Singaporean roster of five Singaporean players. They went over the Team Flash. They played under the Team Flash banner for one split, and then after that, I think they discontinued their partnership with Team Flash, and then those players went over to Resurgence subsequently. I'm not too sure on the exact history of this, but I do believe it's something along those lines. It's only much later on that Flash went into Vietnam.
Yeah. So talking about Flash, Team Flash, Terrence Ting, which is founder of Team Flash. I think a little bit of his history. He started Flash, and then he went out of esports, and then he came back again, like 2 or 3 years ago. And Ivan Yeo as well, whom we interviewed 2 weeks ago from Evos. So I believe you work with these two men. So So what do you think of the two men? Maybe starting with Ivan.
So I've directly worked under Ivan. So I was coaching EVOS Esports in 2018. I was coaching the EVOS Esports team in 2018, and then I joined them halfway through the spring split, and then I went with them to when they won the spring split then, and then we went to MSI together, and then I was with them for about a full year before I went on to Europe. So all the lessons that I learned from Vestige, right? Looking at things and then saying that, yeah, we thought too small, and all the lessons that we had. There was this inner frustration, like looking at the way other esports teams were running, right? So as Vestigio, we didn't have any capital, we didn't have a site, we didn't really know how to raise it. So when I saw something like Ivan come in, not only with the capital, but with the right vision and the right ideas behind what is the vision of esports? That esports is not a sports product, it's a digital media, it's an entertainment product. And so this is something that I felt that, okay, this guy has got it. He has the right idea about what esports should be like. And then he talks about building an ecosystem, right? It's very big picture thinking. So when I saw that, when I heard that, and then when I worked with him, it was the startup thing. When I saw how being run, it was being very bootstrapped at a point of time, and then I saw it progress when it was taken over as they continued to expand to the other countries. I think Ivan is a visionary, right? He's a visionary, and you see this today with the articles that they're publishing, with the work that they have done, with their talent in Indonesia, the type of content that they're producing. Something's hit, something's missed, but you can't fault them for trying because these are not the same type of people. These are not the people who are going in it and then trying to use the sports playbook in the esports context, because that's trying to bring things of the past into the digital media realm where people are trying to figure out what's the next big leap forward.
Yeah, and yeah, because when I interviewed him, I was amazed by his idea, his business thoughts, and definitely he's a bit it's a bit different. So comparing to Terence, which you worked with before, you know, so what's Terence thing idea and ideology about esports?
So I haven't worked directly with Terence before, so I don't really know what his ideas or philosophy is like with regards to esports. But I think that it has been more towards the traditional sports idea of that we want to get big teams or we want to be able to win titles and then use that to create leverage, right? So this is something that I learned a lot from Ivan as well. It's about how do you create leverage for yourself as an organization as compared to the rest of your peers in the field, or even leverage over the people that you're negotiating with, like the sponsors and stuff like that. So Flash's approach that is that we are going to have the strongest team, we're going to have the best teams in the region, so that there is this idea and perception of strength behind it. And then that is going to be their unique, that's going to be their USP of sorts. And while I'm critical of the way that many other people have approached this, I do think that Flash so far they have been rather successful with it with their Arena of Valor team. They have been able to secure big sponsors with Vietjet, and I think the League of Legends team they recently won the domestic championship as well. So I think things should be on the upswing for them.
Yeah, I'm sure with these two personnel in esports, Singapore or the region esports scene is going to get better and better. So yeah, so I'm going to move on to the next question, which is how did you get into coaching, like, and how did you go to the different, who gives you the opportunity to go to the different countries to coach actually?
So how things started for me as a coach, as a professional coach, was only when I was scouted to join a Taiwanese team. So this was while I was running Bastijo, right? But if you talk about to give a full answer to this, I wouldn't call it coaching. I never really called it coaching because coaching requires some form of institutionalized power. And in the past, when there was no organization, when I'm just there as a sixth person who has some form of leadership responsibility over the team, I was never truly a coach towards the Singaporean team in the past. But how all of this started was that I auditioned to be a shoutcaster at the end of 2013. I became a shoutcaster throughout 2014. Midway through 2014, I had to cover all the Southeast Asian games, right? And that covers as well. And I'll watch the way that they play, and I'll just get frustrated because I'll look at them play and I'll just say that, okay, you guys are making these mistakes. And it's quite clear that these other things could be done as well. So I didn't just want to be a armchair critic and a commentator. You know the uncle in the coffee shop who's watching the football match on TV and then he sees the striker miss a shot. It's like, even I could have scored a goal and stuff like that. I didn't want to be just that. So I wanted to put my money where my mouth was, and I became an advisor of sorts to the team. And the teams that I worked with, there was a lot of positive feedback. Some of them say that they didn't like my casting, but they felt that my advice and my guidance that the guidance that I provided them in terms of how to think about the game, in terms of how to process the various problems that they were facing, was very useful. And so that let me continue on over there. And the Singaporean teams that I was working with, we had decent results. So keep in mind that all the Singaporean teams are part-time teams. We are working with students, we're working with people who are serving the national service, and we would at best train 6 hours a week as a team. And we were going up against teams who are practicing 60 to 80 hours a week. And then we would be able to be competitive with them. We wouldn't beat them, we wouldn't win, we wouldn't steal the tournament from them, but we would have the occasional upset, we would steal the occasional game, and we had decent showings at these international events when we were playing the Southeast Asian circuit. So the Taiwanese teams, I think they saw what Nelson and I were doing, and that they offered us opportunities to go over and coach there in 2017.
Oh, I see. So, so you went to many countries, coached many people. So, what was your most memorable or best time in coaching? Can you tell us more on that occasion?
I mean, I've been to a lot of places, right? But I think the biggest highlight for me was in 2019, so the spring spell of
Yeah.
2019, when I joined the Spice Vipers in Spain. So this was for the SLO. So when I joined Spice Vipers, now they're known as the Mad Lions in the LEC. Um, this was an all-star roster that they had. It was supposedly at the academy level, right? It was supposedly an all-star roster, but they were doing very poorly. They were in eighth place at the point of time when I joined them, and I was able to turn the team around from eighth place into a first place team, winning our way through the playoff bracket to win the domestic title in Spain itself. And why this was such a big highlight for me was that before that I was working in Asia. I was working in Vietnam, where I mean, I wouldn't even consider Vietnamese to be a third language for me because my understanding of the language is very, very basic. I know how to order food. I know how to tell the driver to turn left and right. And my place is in front, stop here, stuff like that. But it was not good enough to coach. And my ability to coach was very limited in Chinese as well. I will elaborate a little bit more on those challenges later. But this is the first time I was taking all those lessons, right? And I was taking it and applying it into the context where I felt that this was my true ability being able to be shown when I'm able to coach in English in a language that I'm comfortable and not just fluent in but eloquent in. So I felt that I took all these concepts, I took all these systems that I built in the past, and this was it paying off. It was a very strong form of validation where I finally went to Spain and was able to turn this team around, solve all the problems with the players, and help them win the domestic championship.
Yeah, I so talking about Spain, and I believe that Spain is not the only one team that you turn around. As in your recent stint in Australia, you did the same to a local Sydney team. Am I right?
Yes, and that was a Legacy Esports. They are the esports arm of the Adelaide Football Club. And in the last year, they finished in eighth place. So they finished last place. They played 21 games in the season. They only won one game and they lost 20 games. So coming into this year, the GM, he wanted to do an entire overhaul of it. They wanted to do entire rebranding of the brand as well, and they wanted to push for this very aggressively. They reached out to me, and I thought it was quite interesting the offer they had on hand. So I went over there, and then it was a challenge as well. It was a challenge as well trying to work in that scene because when you work in what we call the minor regions, of which Singapore is a minor region in the League of Legends scene as well, your talent pool is limited. You have to be able to come up with all sorts of solutions to the various challenges that they have on a day-to-day basis. It's kind of like working on a smaller budget of sorts as well. So I was able to come in and help me structure things, implement the systems that I had. And for me, because I knew that what I did worked in Spain, so I was able to take the same things and it was equally effective as well with this Australian team. And we were able to win the domestic championship. And I think in quite a dominant fashion as well.
So again, you have been to many countries and region and city, coaching, and I want to do a bit of a comparison between these countries. What's the biggest difference between this country in terms of esports, players quality, the standards of play, the kind of support from each of the countries. Can you share a little bit, after traveling to so many countries?
So Well, there's a lot to answer in this question. So let me think about where I should start. Let's start with player quality, right? Like when you work in China, when you work in Europe, these are what we call the major regions, right? The
Yep.
League of Legends scene. There are four major regions. There's Korea, China, Europe, and North America. And these major regions, they have a much deeper talent base to source people from because they have large servers and there's a lot of people playing on these servers. So in terms of like scouting talent, or in fact, even like in Europe and China, the second division is brimming of talent. So all the time in China, all the time in Europe, you see these rookie players coming up from the second division and then being able to play, and not just fulfill in the first division, but be able to win championships as well. So um, there's a much more depth of talent in those places as compared to the minor regions where the player bases are smaller with the exception of course being Vietnam, because Vietnam is a strange oddity in which that they not only do they have a large player base, it is the only server in the world where people play the ranked competitive mode more than the normal game modes in Vietnam. Culturally, hmm, I think it's more of an East versus West kind of thing. And I think it's also a language kind of thing because the way that you present the language, some things. So this goes back to my point about eloquence, right? Like English is my first language, Chinese is a second language that I studied for 10 years, and I can speak it rather fluently. But to command the same eloquence, that I'm able to draw analogies, paint a picture, and draw imagery that I can do in English, I can't command the same ability that I can do that with Chinese as well. So my ability to interact with players, I wouldn't say it was purely on a literal basis, but there's also so like language is so contextual, so cultural, especially the humor that goes in between like in language and stuff like that, right? So when I was in China, when I was in Taiwan, people tell jokes and stuff. It would just completely fly over my head. I would have these stories about players. They would call a specific term in game but they would say a naughty word, and I don't even realize it's actually a bad word, right? So there's this thing. Uh, well, I can't say it on actual broadcast, but because I didn't know because I didn't know it was a bad word, so I went on the
I
analyst
think I
desk
know
on the
that
online
word.
stream, and I said it in a very casual manner, and then people were flaming me for it. So that was one of the funny experiences, funny stories from it. Right.
Is it? I
And
mean, yeah, it's yeah. I think I'm not sure. Maybe I'm just making a guess. You know, like for example, you have Team Newbie. You know, Newbie being in China is actually not. Yeah, it's okay, but it doesn't sound really good actually. Newbie. Yeah, I can relate to that. Okay, moving on. Do you think let's talk a little bit about Singapore because we were always talking about other regions in Singapore, and now that I believe you are back in Singapore, and you will be, your next team will be a Singapore team. Do you think that in Singapore we can ever have a real superstar in esports?
So this is a tricky question, right? Because when you talk about superstars in esports and the way you frame the question, I would actually tell you that there already are superstars of sorts in esports, right? Ice, Chowi, and I think Xian, these probably come close to being considered superstar status when it comes to esports. But you talk about like superstars, right? And like in the Michael Jordan context, will we? My question is, will we even see a superstar in the digital age today? Because in the past, entertainment was so formal, right? It's so formal. You want to get entertainment, you watch television, you consumed it. There's a big match happening, and then it will be on the newspapers. It will be the front of the sports section. Sometimes it will even be front page news on the newspaper. Like the Lakers winning the third title in a row or something like that. I don't really follow basketball, so I'm not sure. But I know people were talking about the last dance because that was that recently available on Netflix. So a lot of people are talking about that recently. Will we ever see a superstar of like Michael Jordan status ever from Singapore in the esports context? I don't really think so. Because I just think that in the digital age today, such superstars are will be too easily supplied and it's too diluted simply by the amount of content that is available out there nowadays. You wouldn't have people like growing up. You wouldn't have the same legions of people growing up like just watching people play Michael Jordan, the same way that people would be watching. a particular game. You would have to be cult level status, right? Like Faker is the considered to be the best player in League of Legends. So nowadays, like from a coaching standpoint, objectively speaking, is he still the best player in the
Yeah,
world?
Faker.
I think that that's a very arguable debate. But in the mind space of people, in the narrative of people, he is the only person when people talk about greatness, right? When people see that, when people see a good player in the game, they describe it as, oh, this guy's literally Faker and stuff like that, even though Faker has been making a lot of mistakes as of recent times as well. So will we ever see like Faker comes close to being that? And this is somebody who was there. He broke out 7 years ago, and he has been dominating the scene. He has been dominating the scene for the last 7 years. We will need somebody to go out there and not just be able to win it, like he has this guy's won three world championships. We don't just need somebody to win a world championship. We need somebody to match that tenure and the longevity, or even not just match it, but exceed it. Because you have to exceed what the predecessor does in order to achieve that type of superstar status.
So that's quite, talking about, Faker, talking about the League of Legend. Faker, I read some of his story, you know. So, and in Singapore, what is lacking here actually? Do you think that, you know we so because you were saying that from 2015 until now, the sponsors or the advertiser or the brands are still doing trial and error in this space. So it seems that it hasn't grown too much, especially in Singapore, with regards to esports. So what is lacking here in Singapore, do you think?
So I would say that the first mistake is talking about Singapore, right? Because once you look at a digital type of product or a media, an online media type of product in a geographical constraint in the context of Singapore, I think that's when you start to have problems. Like if you look at the art scene across in Singapore, the sports scene across in Singapore, any entertainment related product in Singapore, it struggles to do well. And I think there was even like recent controversies as well when The Voice they came to Singapore and then they made it only Chinese singers and stuff like that. Not Chinese by race, but you have to sing and people speak Chinese. And that's because of the way that the media economy works. As Singapore, we have a population of close to 6 million people, and of the 6 million, only about close to 4 million of those are citizens and permanent residents, right? That's a very, very small population. We're even smaller than like the likes of Norway and stuff like that. So the number of people, and we don't have a unique language to ourselves. So the moment we produce any content, it's going to be in English or it's going to be in Chinese. And straight away, you're competing with the two largest markets out there. There's no unique market to Singapore. So if we're just trying to think about how can we create unique Singaporean content, that's a losing battle. And I think that that was the mistake that I made in 2015 when I was running 2015 2016 when I was running Vestigial, when we were thinking too small. We're just thinking about Singapore only, or we only even thinking about Singapore and maybe Vietnam and people who speak English in Vietnam, because the moment you speak English or the moment you do English speaking content, you're competing with US, you're competing with Hollywood, you're competing with Netflix. Netflix is your competitor, and that's a giant and that's a giant that you're competing with right there. So that's I think one of the biggest challenges. Like we don't have a large population, we don't have a unique language, and as such, it's very difficult to bring up create a more sustainable business model if you're doing it in the online space. Not to say that's impossible though.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're talking about the population being one, and then the second thing, which is the language that we speak, because although we have our own native mother tongue, but the English being still the language that's very well spread here, and if we speak English, we doesn't really, the content doesn't really get to the masses with regards to the other ASEAN countries, for example. For example, if you're in Vietnam, probably Vietnamese content will be the important. And if you're Thailand, Thai, and then if you're Indonesia, Bahasa Indonesia. So we are actually not in a very good position in terms of competitiveness with regards to the language that we speak. Right? Is that right? Does it summarize your?
I wouldn't say it's like competitiveness. It's just if you want to do English content, you're competing with Hollywood, you're competing on Netflix. Whereas if I were to go to Cambodia today and do Khmer content, right?
Yeah.
That is going to be the people that I'm competing with are not going to be as big, are not going to be as big. Because if I'm competing in the English space, then Disney is my competitor. because they already exist. They already have the top minds already working on this. Whereas if I'm going to go to another Southeast Asian country that speaks their own endemic language, then I'm competing with the traditional media people over there, and I think that that's a I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's the skill of the challenge is definitely going to be much lesser.
You you are still very young, I think, probably under 30, right? Uh,
Yeah, I'm turned 20 this year.
so what's indeed in your future? Where do you see yourself maybe in the next 10 or 20 years? Uh, Still in esports or still in the coaching role and still doing League of Legend, or you'll be jumping to another title, for example. You want to talk a bit about your
Well,
own future?
I'll be honest here, right? And I'm going to paraphrase what William Lee, or known as Skara, said on his podcast with Ryan Hager. And he says that in the world of esports, you just don't know what's going to happen, right? People ask you, what's your plan 5 years down the road? And he said in the interview that he doesn't even know what he's going to be eating for breakfast the next day. Uh, Although I wouldn't take it to such an extreme comparison, for me, I'll just say that this is such a new industry. You really don't know what's going to be happening. When I first started out in this in 2017, I said that this is going to be a 3 to 5 years in coaching, and then at the end of 3 years, I did a self-evaluation. So this was at the end of last year when I won the Spanish Championship, and I just felt that I had the right tools. And I was watching the World Championship at the end of last year, and I said, okay, I think I know how to build a strong team that can get us there as well. Um, if I'm given the right tools as well. So I felt that I had the tools, but I hadn't achieved the full potential of it yet. So I decided to extend it out to the full 5 years and see how it goes. After the five years, there's a few things that I'm passionate about, right? And directly related to esports, it would probably be somewhat related to my book as well, like helping the next generation of players and stuff like that. Um, but I think that there's two big things in the esports. So two big things within the esports domain and one other thing outside of that. So the two things within the esports domain is probably the first one is how can I help people translate their gaming skills into tangible things, into tangible assets? Because I do believe that um, despite the bad rap that gaming has nowadays, because people are thinking about games like Maple Story and stuff like that that don't have much as much of a cerebral element to it. So, I mean, no offense to people who play those games, of course, but in comparison to the likes of a real-time strategy game, which requires you to process
Yep.
lots of information, 10 players, 4 abilities each, and be able to problem solve on that level and work through a high-stress environment and a fast pace. Those skills, I think, are very, very valuable to problem solving in, say, an engineering context or science context. I do believe that people who make excellent gamers will make outstanding people in the STEM fields as well, because the same problem solving skills that you need in gaming are very, very useful in the STEM fields. And that was my experience, like coming from both sides of it as well. So that'll be the first thing, one of the things that I'm looking at in terms of like doing courses or helping people be able to work on that aspect of their life. So that's like reaching a much larger audience. Because at the end of the day, when I chose to do coaching, I chose to do this because I felt that I would be able to impact a larger number of people, and this would be me continuing on with that, right? The second one, in line with esports, would be to do coaching related workshops, like coach the coaches and stuff like that. Because I feel that my strength as a coach, or I feel that in fact my unique selling point as a coach is that I'm very systematic. Because consistently, all the organizations that I've worked with, I've been able to raise the level of the rest of the staff with me upwards. Because my one of my key strengths that I kind of have to thank the Singaporean government for national service for this, because I would always sit down and then like just flip through and read through those thick SOP books and try and figure out, okay, what made sense, what didn't make sense and stuff like that. And I've been very successful transferring that over into a coaching aspect. How do I transform a complicated system, a complicated network of processing information into a series of simple steps? How do I write a policy that can give players the right broad stroke? How do I write a policy staff the right guidance that they need in order to handle the complicated scenarios that you face on a I wouldn't say day to day. I wouldn't say day to day, but on a rather frequent to infrequent basis in the esports context. So like going over there and then becoming if there's a organization for like coaches to go over and like train other coaches as well, that's something that I could be looking at. And then the third option would be to pursue the other thing that I was considering when I was choosing between esports and my engineering degree, which should be going back to engineering and working on green solutions to waste management, which is what I spent my 4 years of university doing.
You were talking about army, you know. Just a little bit, although, which uni did you go to back then?
Oh, I was a military police in 605 Squadron. So that's the Field Defense Squadron and Tengah Air Base. So I was in charge of the glorified way to say it is that I was in charge of security operations of the air base. Yeah, I'll just leave it as
Which
that.
airbase? Because I was I was
Tengah.
from FDS as well, you know. Anyway, that's the end of our first segment, and we will do a quick 5 minutes commercial break, and then we'll be right back to hear about Jensen and his journey into esports from amateur to pro, and we're going to talk about his new book. So, thank you. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. 电竞呢是一个很奇妙的一个新兴行业。当你是打到最高的那种比赛呢，它是一种竞争荣誉。它就是体育赛事跟流行文化的一个结合体。我对这个电竞这个行业呢很有信心。电竞行业的未来呢，就好比流行文化。如果要跟年轻一代呢去沟通的话呢，你必须走电竞这一块。未来呢的前景呢是很光芒的。很多品牌呢，它是需要借用电竞这个平台呢，去跟现在的年轻人呢去沟通的，也就是去推广他们的产品。新加坡电竞行业呢，还是处于很初级的一个状态。第一个原因呢，因为新加坡市场小。毕竟才500万，父母呢对孩子打电竞这一块呢还是不是太接受。新加坡电竞行业呢是需要所有的电竞行业的人士呢一起出来构想、构思、统筹，看怎么把这一块呢再推到另一个阶层。所以呢，我们就构思了这个地方，就是 The Gym。1楼呢是一个活动空间。2楼呢是一个共享办公室，然后呢，我也希望呢，以这个构思呢，去把新加坡所有的电竞行业的人呢，给都串起来，然后让他们的实时呢都能够在这里交流，然后呢看怎么去推进这个区域的整个电竞的一个趋势。We hear Jensen's coaching life, in 8 different countries. In Singapore, his journey from 2015 till now, and coaching a team from the bottom of the team and all the way up to the top of the team. That was amazing. We want to come back and talk about your new book, Jensen. Is the book launched yet? If you see from the back title, From Amateur to Pro, the Esports Pursuit of Mastery. Is that book launched yet?
Yeah, the book has already been printed, has been published, so it's available for sale. And if you do want to get it, I'm currently you can contact me, and then you provide me an address. I'll provide you a means to pay for it, and then I'll send it to you.
And what inspired you to write that book? And what's that book all about?
So the book details the insights that I've had moving from the amateur scene, like as an amateur gamer. Like most people would understand, or they would perceive the concept of serious fun, and then being able to translate that into a professional career, and how to manage the tricky transition phase that people tend to trip up along the way. So I get this question a lot and very often. How do I go pro in the world of esports? And usually it's a very difficult question to answer because it's a very opportunistic thing. And most of the time, if you have to ask me the question, I think it's kind of like the wrong place to start. But this book will give you a good idea of the various challenges that you would face along the way and some of the solutions that I've had in terms of how to tackle them. As to what made me want to write this book, I've always wanted to share my experiences because I've always felt that the things that I've experienced has always been rather unique. And there's been a lot of very inspirational stories that I've come across. Because for me, when I was like learning, when I was progressing through life, as a semi-competitive gamer all the way to being a professional coach, there was no one really there to guide me. And the best I had was the inspirational figures out there that I had from maybe a school teacher that just told me not to mention that he's a he's a champion at a card game. But that was one of the inspirational figures I've had to people who did online content like Day Nine. Um, these are very big inspirational figures in my life, and I thought that I wanted to put the content that I can share with the next generation of people, or even people within this generation as well, to help them inspire to do better or learn from my mistakes and my experiences as well.
I'm sure a lot of people is going to benefit from your book, and I'm sure that any up and coming players or even coaches that wanted to, do a good job in this esports, must and surely get a copy of your book. And being an amateur in 2015, I believe, was it at that time? Was it even even hard to start in esports? Was it hard to start in esports at that time?
I would say that I already had a foot in the door at a point of time because I was a shoutcaster since the end of 2013. So I was already kind of involved in the esports scene of sorts. So back then, when the Greener Stadium used to be a Focus Plus, if you walked around there, you would see this giant screen, and then you would see my face pop up on it once in a while because you'd see me doing the live commentary of the matches over there. So I already had a foot in the door at that point of time. And so, how hard is it? Um, I would have to say it is rather challenging. Networking is a very important skill, it's a very key skill, as with any industry out there. Uh, and the front door, because of how difficult it is, right? Like if you talk about are there any qualifications there are to be a coach? Are there any qualifications that are to even be a player? To be a player is a lot easier with the prevalence of the online ladder nowadays, right? You do well there, you put up some good results, and then you could get scouted, but as a coach, it's much more difficult. So I would say that there's definitely been a lot of luck, and there's been some very amazing opportunities that have come my way in terms of making this transition. So why I said that. Um, so some people they are 1 or 2 steps up the ladder already, and they're encountering some problems in their life, like how do I balance work and school? And people like to sell this very rosy narrative that, oh, in the pursuit of greatness, I sacrificed my education, I sacrificed my relationship with my family and stuff like that. And I think that that's a very false narrative. It's a very romantic narrative, and one of the things that I talk about in this book as well. Um, in terms of strategies that you can use to overcome these style of problems, right? You don't have to buy into the narrative. In fact, this is one of the things that I'm very against in general. People who go around and sell people the whole used car salesman pitch of follow me to Hollywood and leave your family and chase your dreams and stuff like that. That's one of the things that I'm quite against because I do believe in a much more balanced life approach towards all of this.
So you were a graduate, you know, with a mechanical, I think, engineering degree, a mechanical engineer. Am I right? Yeah, and you decided to go to the esports route. So what did your parents think about this? You know, did you give them a big shock when you do esports, or did anything happen?
Well, I think that my parents were always they're very typical tiger Asian parents, right? With very Asian parenting aspirations as well. So of course they weren't very approving of it. And I think until today, whenever I'm back home in Singapore, sometimes they ask me how much I'm making and stuff like that. And then they will compare with other people they know. It's a very typical Asian parenting to do. And then they will always ask me to go back to engineering. Then maybe I could be earning this much and stuff like that instead. But it's a challenge, but I think that they have kind of accepted the fact that I've grown up and they have kind of like let go and allow me to pursue my decisions accordingly.
E- I totally agree. You know, I I too am an engineering graduate, but I've never no. I started engineering for maybe 5 months back then, back in 2004, and my parents think the same thing when I went into the event industry. You know, they were thinking that and honestly, to the parents out there, if you study engineer, don't go into engineering because that's not where the money is. The money is, you know, we're pretty sure, for me, as I'm pretty sure now, the money is in esports, you know, especially, not now maybe, but in the next 5 to 10 years. So there is always a start to your career. And, and I agree, you know, and I will support, you know, what you said actually, because I went through that phase. I graduated 15 years ago, and now here I am, you know, I don't do engineering, you know. Engineering is a dream, but at the end of it, it's, uh, I'm sure it is what you like in the end. So back to our topic of a book. You know, in one of your chapter, we talk about time hacking. Can you talk a bit about this interesting concept that you have with time hacking?
Okay, so one of the challenge that when you try to manage the pro am life, right, is that you're leading effectively a double life because you are going to be putting in the hours to compete with people on the professional level in whatever hobby or interest that you have, right? So be it that you are trying to become a musician, you're trying to pursue gaming, you're trying to become a swimmer and stuff like that, and you need to be able to sink large amounts of time into this. So if you're going to have a regular schedule like a regular person, you're not going to be able to fit the that amount of time in for both. The four keywords that I use is the budget, prioritize, optimize, and replace. And I elaborate more on these four concepts in the book. And the idea is that you want to be able to break down your week. So the useful thing about the university education system is that they give you a certain number of credits, right, which is assigned to the number of hours that you expect to spend within a week. So that really gives you an idea of how much time that you have to budget. And it's very, very useful to do this budgeting exercise to figure out how much time you have and then allocate time accordingly. And the mistake that people make is that they only write down the things that they think that they should be doing, and they don't factor in things like they don't budget time for sleep, they don't budget time for them to goof off, they don't budget time for them to Netflix and stuff like that. Because the fourth step of replacing is going to be one of the key strategies as well. Because when people budget, they always make the mistake of over budgeting. I want to learn the piano, to learn how to swim. I want to be able to reach grandmaster in this game, and I want to score a perfect GPA within the same semester, right? If you don't, you have something that's got to give, and you have to realize that what is it that you're replacing, and then there's some are more important than the others. So that's where the prioritizing part comes to it, and then the optimization part comes in as well, where you try to figure out what how can you make certain things more efficient. So things like utilizing online learning tools so that you don't have to sit through a 3 hour lecture on a topic that you can learn in 30 minutes and stuff.
So there was also a segment where you talk about transferable skill sets from engineering to esports. Can you give an example?
So this is actually not it, it deals a lot of the soft skills. So I did a lot of design engineering, right? So we did a lot of product development, and one of the things that one of the two key skills that I found was very, very useful in my esports career as well was rapid prototyping as well as end user design thinking. So let's start with end user design thinking, right? The mistake that people often make is about what they always think about, what can I give to people, instead of asking the question of what do people want from me, and how can I generate a unique selling point that fulfills these wants that people have, right? And this is a very important mindset to have when you try to tackle problems, because it's not about what do I think is right for the team as a coach. It's about what do the players want to achieve, and how can I fulfill that. So it is that form of thinking, and then you use the same form of ideation process as well that we learn in design thinking classes for engineering school, and then apply it in the esports context as well. Because if you just try to look at things at a very like the mistake that engineers always make is that they always jump to product solutions, right? So you look at the possible solutions to problems. There's people, there's objects, there's environment, messages, and services, right? There's five different domains in which that um, you can execute a solution towards a particular problem. But people tend to overfixate as engineers. You tend to overfixate on the object part of it. How can I design a tool that can help people do certain things better? But there's a whole four other domains that you're ignoring. So when I was approaching coaching as well, the fact that they taught us this in engineering school to make us aware of this blind spot was very useful as well. So and when I'm tackling problems that okay, my player has this issue trying to overcome this particular challenge in learning this. So is this a person solution? And do I need to bring in somebody else to coach him? Is this an object solution? Is this something that I can provide him something with? Like say if he's experiencing is his keyboard set up in the wrong way, right? Is it a messaging issue in the way that he has self-messaging that creates a very self-imposed psychological limitation? And then services in terms of like directly providing my coaching service to him to go through things with him as well. So it lets you explore much larger form of things. And I think the engineering mindset when it comes to like problem solving, what are the limitations that we're looking at, and how do you solve these limitations? And you start with it. Okay, what's stopping you from going further, right? So what's the limiting factor here? How can we remove that? Thinking of things in safety factors as well to account for errors within games as well. These are all transferable skill sets. And then the other one is rapid prototyping, right? Um, running in the strategy domain, especially for games like League of Legends or I think Dota as well, this should apply to any game that sees a regular patch cycle. The game is changing at such a rapid pace. Part of your job as a coach and as a player is you are sort of running a research team as well. And if you learn the ways of like quickly prototyping, so you don't feel too attached to one idea, and you're able to rapidly churn through ideas and know how to assess them quickly as well, then this is a engineers can have if they are able to take these same skill sets and the same mindsets over into a gaming and esports context.
Yep, I know. I totally agree that our engineering education does help, in the way that we solve certain problems and issues in our career. And I must see, and I'm really, surprised that it can also applicable to esports, you know. So moving on to some parts of the books, you are in China, you were in China for a period of time, and I'm curious because I myself have been in China from 2005 to 2014. So there's this culture shock that you talk about. So what was this culture shock about, and what was the mistake that you commit back then in your book? You said in your book.
So this is about me. I'm somebody who always tries to experiment with, and I'm trying to think about how can I become a better coach and stuff. So when I look at my experience in Taiwan, and I realize that people that they're very attuned to a schooling system when I was working in Taiwan, and I tried to borrow this concept of transcendental power, right? The idea is I wanted to invoke similar environments to borrow power from these environments in order to help lend more credibility to my coaching ability and my ability to persuade players to take on certain things to push themselves to be better. So the very common institutions in which people find self-improvement are family as well as learning institutions such as school. I wanted to create a very school-like environment in the team that I was working with in China, but I didn't do the prerequisite work, right? So this is going back to the end user design thinking thing that I came with that I think this is best, but I didn't do my interviews with the players to figure out what is it that they really wanted. And I was bringing this entire school-based system, schedule that resembled a lecture, tutorial, network with homework system as well for the players. And the feedback that the players gave me is that they absolutely hated it because some of them they quit school because they hated school so much. That's why they chose to pursue League of Legends. And they felt that I was bringing out that negative sentiments towards it. So instead of like borrowing the power of a learning institution, I ended up evoking all the negative sentiments that they had towards the teachers they've had in the past who probably weren't too effective. That's why they ended up hating school that much. And it made them very distrustful and very biased against moving forward from there. So that set things off on a very bad foot. And then having to navigate now after I've made a mistake, the whole scenario in Chinese, where I'm not able to deliver the same eloquence to be able to win them back. It was a challenge working from there, and I realized that okay, this was not really working out for me.
So were you able to turn things around? Like, they don't like to study, they don't like to do, tutorial and stuff. Were you able to turn things around with handling them back then?
It was a short period of time. I did what I could with the players that were there, but it's a painful lesson, and it's one that I always do include it because so some people when they go over for like these short stints they don't include it, but to me it was such a big learning experience for me going in there and then trying to force my ideas onto people when it didn't necessarily work out. I wouldn't necessarily it's force, right? It's just going with the wrong strategy without doing the necessary field work. I just include it because I always tell the story to people saying that when you navigate cultural context, you always have to be careful. Um, you always have to understand at the end of the day what is it that the players are sensitive to, what is it that they want, and how best can you come in, right? So other things that I've worked on using a similar concept as well is trying to gamatize training, so as to get players to want to push themselves more to reach the next level as well.
So if you were given a chance to roll back time, what will you do differently, in your entire career until now?
So if I were to roll back time, there's many to be honest. Like from small interactions with players to drafting decisions or strategical decisions in game that I've made on stage as well, or even in the prep room. But if I could take all the knowledge that I have now, I would probably use it to leverage what we had with Vestigio in 2015 and 2016 and grow a much stronger esports brand from there. I'm probably not just going to think about, oh, we only want to do Singapore, Malaysia, Southeast Asia. Probably look much more big picture. How can we come up with a strong content hub and probably uh, take the EVOS playbook that they're kind of using now and then bring it back to 2015 and then execute on it back then.
Is there a lowest point in your life back then, or that you want to share, or?
So if I were to roll back time, There's many, to be honest, like from small interactions with players to drafting decisions or strategical decisions in game that I've made on stage as well, or even in the prep room. But if I could take all the knowledge that I have now, I would probably use it to leverage what we had with Vestigio in 2015 and 2016 and grow a much stronger esports brand from there. I'm probably not just going to think about, oh, we only want to do Singapore, Malaysia, Southeast Asia. Probably look much more big picture. How can we come up with a strong content hub and probably uh, take the EVOS playbook that they're kind of using now and then bring it back to 2015 and then execute on it back then.
Is there a lowest point in your life back then, or that you want to share? Or
Well, I think so. Here's the thing, right? That many people look at my life and say, "Wow, you're such a journeyman, right? It's such a wonderful adventure. You have been to 8 different countries and stuff like that." But the travel and the periodic joblessness is kind of a downings because, to be honest, being a coach is kind of being like a football manager, right? When the team doesn't do well, sometimes people blame the players, but most of the time, like in football, when Paul Pogba he's not performing on the pitch, people are not calling fired; they're calling for Mourinho to be fired instead, and you face the same pressures as a coach as well. Sometimes you end up being hired into the position of being a professional scapegoat, and you have to take on that role as well to be able to shield your players and to shield the team as well. So there's a lack of job security in general, and then the anxiety that I faced in general, especially at the end of last year when I felt that I was doing so well, but I was not able to secure a team because of visa reasons and because of travel reasons as well. I That was a very very low point when I felt that I was doing well, so why was I not being rewarded? And there's this huge dissonance in my life that I had to tackle.
what? I mean, I think one very question that we want to know is, what type of coach are you? Temperament or very calm? What type of coach? What's best to describe your coaching style?
Uh, I mean, when I did the webinar, I talked about the 4 domains, right? And I think that this the domain that I specialize in is the systems domain. So I always just break things down into the basics, right? I go back to the players and then I break down things into a four. Like I see this the four steps of decision making, right? What information am I processing? Am I collecting the right information, right? Then the second is how do I process the information? The third is what is the decision that I make based on the information that I process? And the fourth part is how do I execute this decision? So I mean, the way you framed it is a bit interesting when you talk about am I calm, am I temperamental? Because these are things. It depends on the players that you work with as well. So some players you talking to them in a calm manner is good, but some I wouldn't say it's temperamental, but you need to appeal to the like you have the 3 domains of persuasion, right? The logos, the ethos, and the pathos, right? So sometimes a very strong logical approach to it is good. Sometimes you need to appeal to the emotional side of them, and sometimes you need to appeal to the sense of credibility and authority as well. So if that's what you mean by temperamental, sort of yes. But if you see temperamental as the guy in like Whiplash, have you seen that movie? What's his name? The guy who slaps the drummer, right? Are you rushing or are you dragging and stuff like that? No, that's not really the kind of things that I do. But there is definitely an emotional element in this because one of the domains of coaching is the relationship domain. How do you build empathy with players? And that is being able to exercise that emotional aspect together with them as well. And yes, and sometimes it will involve painful decisions. It might, I would say, it might involve a very exchange between people.
So, in your pursuit of esports pursuit of mastery, and any regrets walking this path?
I think it's the fact that I'm just overseas so often, and the fact that I've been in so many countries, right? My social circles, like, it's kind of a double whammy. Like, once you leave university, people start to grow apart. But for me, I'm not even in the same country anymore, and I'll make friends in Taiwan, and I wouldn't get to see them again, and I don't be able to see them again in the future. And going to 8 different countries and meeting all these people, and then coming back to Singapore, sometimes you do feel lonely. You do feel lonely. But I guess that's the price that I have to pay for the pursuit of all of this.
I'm, no, I'm sure. I'm sure you definitely will see a point of time where you will reap your rewards, in the future, and I really think that and you're not too far away from that time, and I think yeah. So for some of the young players out there, what advice can you give them? Or anybody?
Most importantly, stay in school, right? No matter what people tell you, no matter it's like, oh, I feel so close that I'm gonna reach this. Especially if you're Singaporean and there's national service knocking on your door, stay in school, finish school, continue to pursue gaming, continue to pursue through your national service, and then after that, consider going pro. That's the most important thing that I would advise. Lead a balanced life, stay in school. I'm going to repeat that because that's how important I think it is. And always have the idea of pursuing mastery in mind. Because this is something that I give my juniors because when I went back to my alma mater for my secondary slash JC, which is NUS High, they asked us what made us choose this alternative path, right? It was a paths being taken by people who didn't pursue the STEM fields, from people who came from a math and science school. And I said that there is no alternative path. There's only one path, and the path is mastery. Aim to be a better person of yourself every single day, and it doesn't matter what domain you end up in, and you will find yourself succeeding in the field to a certain degree, of course.
Jensen Goh, we thank you so much for your time. And before we let you go, I just, how much is your book again?
So currently, this is selling for 17 Sing dollars. My book is selling for 17 Sing dollars, including mailing. Depending on how you choose to purchase it, it will come out to be, if it's locally, it's 18.50. If it's overseas, you can check out my Twitter profile for the full list of shipping prices for the book.
So, okay, we're going to have that information on our Facebook page after this episode, and then you can actually click to purchase the book from the link, I'm sure, directly from Jensen. And we thank you for your time. It was really a good, impactful to know your journey from amateur to pro. And then I'm pretty sure, as a Singaporean, it was amazing to find out that we have such a kind of a caliber in the esports coaching world, in you. And I hope all the best to you, and I hope that in the future endeavors you will perform as bring our local team to the top of the League of Legends tables. Maybe they can get themselves a position in the League of Legends World Finals. That's what I'm hoping. Thank you for your time, and then we'll see you soon. When this circuit breaker is over, I'm pretty sure we'll meet each other and we'll have a cup of coffee and talk about esports. Thank you very much. See you.
电竞呢是一个很奇妙的一个新兴行业。当你是打到最高的那种比赛呢，它是一种竞争荣誉。它就是体育赛事跟流行文化的一个结合体。我对这个电竞这个行业呢很有信心。电竞行业的未来呢，就好比流行文化。如果要跟年轻一代呢去沟通的话呢，你必须走电竞这一块。未来呢的前景呢是很光芒的。很多品牌呢，它是需要借用电竞这个平台呢，去跟现在的年轻人呢去沟通的，也就是去推广他们的产品。新加坡电竞行业呢，还是处于很初级的一个状态。第一个原因呢，因为新加坡市场小。毕竟才500万，父母呢对孩子打电竞这一块呢还是不是太接受。新加坡电竞行业呢是需要所有的电竞行业的人士呢一起出来构想、构思、统筹，看怎么把这一块呢再推到另一个阶层。所以呢，我们就构思了这个地方，就是 The Gym。1楼呢是一个活动空间。2楼呢是一个共享办公室，然后呢，我也希望呢，以这个构思呢，去把新加坡所有的电竞行业的人呢，给都串起来，然后让他们的时时呢都能够在这里交流，然后呢看怎么去推进这个区域呢整个电竞的一个趋势。